Hi, everyone. Welcome to this March webinar series. We're really excited to have you guys join us again for another greatest hit. And today we're going to be discussing your warehouse and wondering, is it stuck in 1989? And for today's webinar, if you go to the next slide, Michael, we have a very special guest. So we are actually doing this webinar with one of our greatest clients, School Specialty. And we'll be seeing how School Specialty modernize their operations to keep up with the shifting educational models and new student needs in partnership with Alpine. But before we get started, my name is Brenda Stoltz and I am today's moderator. I will be facilitating this discussion with our wonderful two hosts, Michael Woolman and Joe Geltz. To give you guys a quick introduction and background, so Joe Geltz has had a 25-year career experience in various operational leadership roles across a lot of different businesses, including Georgia Pacific Corporation, Corporate Express, and Staples. And he is currently the Senior Vice President of Operations and Process Excellence at School Specialty, where he is really responsible for the company's fulfillment centers, supply chain, transportation facilities, and driving the company's operational excellence initiatives. His co-host, Michael Woolman, is a trusted advisor with a proven track record that includes 30 plus years of supply chain experience. And throughout his career, he has really helped dozens of Fortune 500 companies develop and implement their supply chain strategies. For today's webinar, we'll be covering a few things. First, we'll give you a School Specialty overview. We'll talk a little bit about the problem that we were really trying to solve, and then we'll discuss in detail the approach that we took to make sure that we got the optimized solution. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Joe.
Thank you, Brenda. Glad to be here today. So School Specialty, a company started in 1959, as you can see, as a telephone supply company, Midwest Telephone Supply. Interestingly enough, got involved in school supplies, right, through some key mergers going through the timeline. But, you know, today, you can consider School Specialty as the nation's largest distributor of school supplies, curriculum, and furniture and equipment. And obviously, as you can see through the timeline, this was achieved through key acquisition and leads us to where we are today, offering more than 100,000 products and services, stocking 32,000 items within our fulfillment centers. And our footprint today is currently comprised of 3 fulfillment centers, a furniture manufacturing site, and an attached warehouse. And we're currently servicing about 90% of school districts in the United States on a B2C basis. Our purpose, and this is really ingrained in the company culture here as well. And everybody from our sales organization through the last leg of our supply chain. We believe that every student can flourish in an environment where they feel safe and inspired to explore and grow. And the purpose is really what leads to the expansion and the depth and breadth of our offering and services and product. And lastly, our promise here, we empower leaders with modern educational ecosystems that optimize the student outcome. So as you saw in the timeline, a history of acquisitions and mergers had built this company to what it is today. Along with that came a footprint. It came facilities utilizing different technologies, and really a challenge to understand how are we facilitating a dynamic supply chain, right? And continuing to offer 100,000 plus and growing annually, by the way. Those offerings and supporting that mission. And in order to achieve this, we really wanted to get an unbiased approach. So we endeavored into a strategic master planning function with Alpine supply chain. And given the fact that we have with recent private equity involvement and the need for funding, we really needed to develop a detailed ROI. And we really wanted to understand, to take this thing into the next level, to take our supply chain to the next level. What would it cost to improve our facilities? But before we wanted to make that investment, we also needed to understand, where are our facilities in the right location in the United States to service our mission. I think the longest pole in the tent was some antiquated systems, right, that we certainly needed to upgrade and bring best practices into our fulfillment centers. We also wanted to understand, are there any quick wins, or is there any quick value, things that we can bring to market quickly ahead of WMS Go Live or any technology integrations? What if we make another acquisition? As you can see on the timeline, I mean, that's kind of what this company's been built on. So there needed to be a thought about capacity and planning for future growth. And in order to do that, like I said, we did contract with Michael Woolman and the Alpine supply chain team, really to take an outside look and an unbiased approach to help develop an overall plan to answer these questions and set things in motion.
So it's funny, Joe. I put a big smile on my face. What if we make another acquisition? How about the fact that you guys have made 2 in the last 6 months?
That's a fair point, right? I was just going on script there, but yes, acquisitions are certainly relevant here in the current state. 2 in the last 6 months.
And I know you've got to be broom swept clean out of the building by St. Patrick's Day. So I hope your journey's going well there.
We're marching
progress.
Yes.
So I actually got the phone call from Ryan, the CEO, and my second call was with Joe, and it was this problem statement. You know, I've got a private equity firm. We're growing. We're making acquisitions. We know we need to make investments. Let's make sure we make the right investments in the right places. And oh, by the way, it's, you know, follow the bouncing ball. So one of the things that we like to help our customers with is understanding what's the cost of doing nothing. So when you look at a strategic master plan, it's a 3, 5, 7-year roadmap. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to understand kind of where we're at. So at that time, we were only focused on 2 of the very large facilities of their 4 to 6 sites and the manufacturing sites. And what we call, you know, alternative 0 is do nothing. So if we keep doing exactly what we're doing and we apply growth, how much labor cost is going to be involved? Then, if we were to make an investment and we were able to benefit from that investment, what would that look like? What's the cost of the benefit? What is the value? What's the net present value? What's the hurdle rate? What's the depreciation? Then we would say, okay, great. What happens if we combine both DCs into one facility? Is it even feasible? Like based on the square footage of the Mansfield site, can we put Greenville, Wisconsin and Mansfield, Ohio in the same building? Could we do it if we added some automation, like an OPEX perfect pick order? If we combine both of the DCs into a brand new facility, what would the size and scale and what would the equipment need to be? And then if we added automation to that, and quite honestly, going into this, I think there was a preconceived notion that maybe school specialty should get out of the fulfillment business and outsource it to a third-party logistics firm. Could they do it less expensive than we would need to invest to fix our current facilities or build a new facility? So we worked with Radial and CJ Logistics once we got the details and the data to evaluate all the scenarios. So what was interesting is if you actually looked at the Greenville facility, they were doing about 50 lines per hour, which is almost like 50-55 is like bin shelf case pick, you know, DC velocity metrics. And then at Mansfield, they were at 55. However, they're doing case pick out of single deep selective rack for the non-conveyable. They've got case flow. So case flow, you should be at about 75 lines per hour. You know, picking out of single deep pallet racks about 35 lines per hour. And then bin shelving should be about 55 lines per hour. So, you know, they weren't too far off based on the mix and the different types of pick methodology in the facilities. But if you guys take a look here at the receiving and the put away, you know, the way that the mixed cases come in and the mixed pallets come in and the check-in process and the processing of that and the put away, you know, those were probably the biggest aha areas on my very first walkthrough to see that there's probably an opportunity to improve the way that they're actually receiving, putting away. And it wasn't until later when we got into the data that we really found some unique opportunities to reduce some replenishment. So if you take where we're at today, again, this was in the beginning of 2020. So we wanted to use 2019 pre-COVID year as kind of the foundation. And then for 2020 to 2021, we went with 4% growth, but then the very next year, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%. So we did a very conservative kind of rollout and saying, if we don't change anything, we continue to grow, our labor is going to go from 8.8 to 9.9, which isn't too bad, 1.1 million. But guess what? We want to make the right investments. We want to get more benefit. We all know that warehouse labor is hard to find. So once we established the do nothing option, we looked at what would it take to actually kind of convert these facilities, and with about a $5.7 million investment using cost of capital at 12% and a depreciation at 100% over a 5-year period, we had identified, we would probably save about a net present value of 3.1 million, 35% IRR, depending on what's important. But for Joe, it was years, right? How many months, how many years, if I made that investment, would we get, the juice for the squeeze? So knowing that we needed to fix the conveyors, specifically in Greenville, and then being able to put a new warehouse control system in, a new WMS in, the RF devices, and then in the reserve, they have everything very narrow aisle and single deep selective rack, which industry standards about 20 to 22 pallets in and out. Where if you go with the 9.5 foot aisle, you're going to go about 50 to 55 pallets per hour. But now you've eaten up a little bit of your floor space. So you would actually make an investment in some pushback rack or double deep rack or drive-in rack to get more density of your storage. And then Alpine services over the course of this project. So that's kind of where we ended up. And we went to the board, and Joe and I presented our good face, and Ryan and Kevin came back and said, where should these DCs be? Like, I'm okay, we're going to make the investment, but like, if we're going to go make this kind of investment, should we really kind of look at and make sure that Greenville, Wisconsin and Mansfield, Ohio is the right answer? So before I jump into that, Joe, anything you want to add about that strategic master plan or any big ahas or, uncoverings that you felt were impressive?
Yeah, Michael, I think the big thing for me at that stage of this strategic master plan, right? Because again, this has been very iterative and fluid as we've gone through the process. But I think the big, not necessarily aha, but I think a win for us, right? As we looked at, should we even be fulfilling orders out of a network and brick and mortar as it relates to the supply chain? And when we did that analysis, I think the real aha then was, with antiquated processes and obviously some things that we need to get upgraded, right? Our teams were doing pretty darn good. And it really kind of ruled out the fact that because of the peak and because of the severity of the influx in demand in the summer, that, it just didn't make sense for us to do this from an outsourcing model. So.
Yeah, because I think any of the third-party logistics providers are going to have to make an investment in the equipment and the systems, and then they're going to bake that into your project over a 3 or 5 year period. Where for the juice versus the squeeze, I think you guys have got the buildings, you got some of the equipment. It's just upgrading some of the conveyors, putting the new WMS in, and maybe swapping out some of the old inadequate equipment for some newer stuff. So I think that was a big aha for everybody, that we thought it was going to go 3PL and the ROI wasn't there. Okay, so Ryan says, okay, yeah, go ahead,
Before
Brenda.
you continue to, I see we have a lot of attendees on the line, so we did mute everyone for the webinar. But if you have any questions, I just want to remind everyone, please use the Q&A in the chat functionality, and I'll make sure to bring those up.
Excellent. So what was interesting is, I think one of the reasons we were able to partner with School Specialty is early in our tenure here, we did a project for school health. So similar, instead of supplies for schools, we were doing all the nurses and athletic offices where they would tape people up for games and those types of things. So we knew a little bit about the industry, knew a little bit about the peak season, which is different than retail. So we thought the 3PL thing was really going to work, but it didn't. So now that we go, okay, fine, we're going to go make these investments. Where should we make them? Should we stay in the same buildings, or should we go to a central DC? So leveraging our technology, we looked at inbound and outbound freight spend and understood exactly where the customers were and where the products were coming in from. On the top here, you can see, heavy populated urban areas have more schools, But then if you really look at the heat map here, you can see exactly some of the areas. And specifically, I'm pointing out this Northeast. So school specialty has been predominantly strong in that Northeast, which really drives a lot of the desire to have a very, tight Northeast facility. But yet with Texas and the West Coast, there's still a demand to pull it to the West side. So it was really interesting to see kind of where the, volumes were, what was happening, and where the demand was. So then if we went, we looked at a single inbound distribution center, we'd be, kind of mid to upper north Indianapolis is down here. On the outbound, you're kind of like in Seymour and have a single combined based on inbound and outbound, you'd be just outside of Indianapolis. So we thought that was really an aha moment, given that we're in Mansfield, which is only certain miles away, and we're in Greenville, which is only certain miles away. So, if we have one facility, we could probably split the difference between these, right? Or what would be the trade-off if we did cannibalize a Mansfield or cannibalize a Greenville? What would our transportation spend go up, and what would the service level go if we went to one DC? Well, after all the hard work and effort, we said, okay, if we're going to do 2 brand new greenfield DCs, where would those be? And we always try and do it within a 250-mile radius. And then what we do is we turn it over to Brenda, and Brenda and her team looks at labor availability, hourly rates, who's the competitor, is there a Walmart, is there an Amazon, is there a Target, is there, some big fulfillment centers in this 250-mile radius, and then we'll fine tune it. Same thing with the East DC. So looking at a 2 DC model, we ended up in Clinton, New Jersey and Overland Park. We said, if we were to go to Harrisburg, it wouldn't be too much of a penalty. Then we said, okay, based on all of that, right? If we looked at Mansfield and Greenville versus a Harrisburg and Greenville versus a Harrisburg and Overland Park, what does that look like? Or a Harrisburg and Tulsa, Harrisburg and Oklahoma. Then we looked at Mansfield and Tulsa, Oklahoma, Denver. And at the end of the day, the best 2 DC network, which was Harrison and Overland Park, would only save us about 1.25 to 1.5 million in transportation spend. And that's probably not enough to justify, a brand new facility. So going back to the private equity and the board, I think, Joe, our recommendation was we can stay in the same places. However, with the growth, we're probably out of space. We're going to have outside storage, but the juice is probably not worth the squeeze to, kind of move the new DC, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I think, you're chasing a $1 million trans spend, and you're also at the risk of penalizing the pull and the effect on the inbound freight as well, right? Because there's a high concentration that we found, and that was an aha for me as well, with a high concentration of loads coming out of the Great Lakes region, right? So it's interesting, based on where our locations are currently today in Mansfield and Greenville, that they're not real far off at this point, right? So it gave us, I think it gave us a model to work from.
And I think a byproduct of this, right, Joe, is you were able to use this and negotiate with FedEx and UPS on your parcel, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, it was a big play in that RFP process as well. And I think the other finding as well, Michael, was obviously cost is one thing, service is the other. We found that even if we were moving these things and we were going to, realize $1 million a year in annual trans reduction, we're really only gaining about not even a half a day in service level in certain areas of the country, because we're covering 90 to 92% of it in 3 days or less, which really coincides with the customer delivery expectations.
And that's a big point, right? So today everybody talks about same day, next day. That's direct to consumer at home. When we're talking about schools, sometimes you find out on Thursday or Friday you're out of something, you order it. As long as you get it there by Monday, you're okay. So school districts are a little different than the direct to consumer. All right, so we've done the strategic master plan. We know what the right thing is. We got to fix the DCs. Before we go fix the DCs, are they in the right place? Absolutely. So now, where are we going? First thing we needed to do is get a new WMS and install it. So, the current state, in the order to start building a roadmap for the future, we needed to understand what was the art of the possible. So in Greenville, they have a pick the light, they have a WCS, they've got RF units, and they were running Sterling's WMS. So back in the day, that was Sterling Yantra, got bought by IBM, and it kind of has gone away. They really were really known for their order management solution. And you also have a TMS. So when we looked at Lancaster, they had the RF units, they had Sterling and the TMS. And then in addition to that, we looked at what was available and what we were doing in Mansfield. So Mansfield had the Pick the Light, the WCS, the RF units, Sterling WMS, and then the TMS. But in Nashua, they were actually running Radio Beacon, which got acquired by Kerber and is part of the Kerber Edge solution today, and their TMS. So we knew that, we had two kind of older WMSs, one WCS, and quite honestly, I think my aha was, I didn't know how old and inadequate the conveyors were in Greenville. Mansfield, when I went there and I took a tour and I really dug in, the conveyors aren't that bad. They're not that old. There was a reset in the building recently, but in Greenville, that was a really loud facility, really old conveyors. And, some of the Pick the Light displays and stuff, hadn't been given the TLC and the love they needed. So looking at where we were at, where we were going and thinking about, the facility, we went and developed, what we would call best in class or the art of the possible. So we understand how you receive, store, pick, pack, ship today. And a lot of that is due to the inadequate functionality of your system. So thinking about voice, thinking about integrating into material handling, being able to do yard management, ASN receiving, really thinking about a print and apply, cartonization, picking directly into the outbound box, getting rid of a lot of those pack stations. So really, we kind of came up with what we need, but here's the really cool, unique things that are going to drive a unique value prop. So we started with understanding the problem. Done. We got the stakeholders, everybody involved. So Joe's counterpart, Jason and Laura, Scott Motes kind of sits between the two, and the rest of the teams from all the sites. So Mike and Brian and everybody got together and we developed our requirements, put the business case together, and we created an RFP. And so leveraging the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, we were able to identify 5 to 7 possible vendors. We did a little RFI, got them the RFP, allowed them to come on site. So this is one of the big things. Alpine does probably 6 to 9 WMS selections a year. And we really want the vendor to understand what they're responding to. So having them meet with the executive team, coming on site, walking the facility to be able to respond to the RFP and also get ready for the demo. So once we do that, we work with the vendor on the scoring, and we worked with the entire school specialty team on what we thought was important: functionality, technology stack, success in their industry, SLAs. And when we get done with that, we had everybody demo, and then we scored the vendors. And the school specialty scored, and we had 2 vendors left. So Blue Yonder leveraged a company called Open Sky. It's one of their resellers and implementers, and then Kerber. So those were the final 2 that we went through the process. And then based on detailed reviews of integration, tech stack, services, references, both functional and technical, we ended up, scoring the final vendors based on total cost of ownership. And at the end of the day, the school specialties team recommended moving forward the Blue Yonder WMS across 3 of their facilities. They moved it to the cloud versus being on-prem. And then what they also did is they said, we need some supporting characters. So they leveraged Magic Logic to do all the cartonization, being able to pick directly into the outbound carton. They're leveraging Optricity, the market-leading slotting optimization tool, to get their facility ready to do a WMS install, and then be able to leverage that as their seasonality and product profile changes. I think Joe said earlier, 100,000 items. That's a pretty long tail, and they keep adding more and more SKUs as they keep acquiring other companies. So Pareto's law says 80% of your volume comes from 20% of your SKUs. You got to make sure those are in the A spots and as things rotate. And then with the integrated parcel manifesting solution, leveraging ProShip. So obviously, this was a school specialty decision. Alpine just developed the requirements, facilitated the process, helped with the scorecards. Joe, any big ahas or anything you want to add about the selection process that we went through?
Yeah, so I think the selection process, obviously very thorough, very comprehensive, and I think it was very beneficial to have, the prioritized or how do I want to say, the selected vendors, right? As we started to whittle down the list, be on site, right, and make observations, right? At the end of the day, I think we can certainly publish process flows, and we can publish, uh, SOPs, if you will. But at the end of the day, I think there's real value in understanding how a process is actually happening, within physical limitations, right, and physical constraints that you may have on site. So it's very helpful to have these guys on site.
Absolutely. That's a great point. So for those of you that are keeping score, we kicked off the project. Our original go live was March, and with ProMat and vacations and some other things going on, we're going live in April. And so we are making sure that the customer is going to get the most value from their investment, and we'll hopefully follow up on that after the go live and share success and hitting the metrics.
We
So
do have one question from our
Yeah.
attendees. And
Yeah.
I think we'd like to hear from both of your perspective, but especially Joe, from client perspective. How important is it to have the vendors visit the site?
Yes, I think it's extremely important for them to visit the site. And, it was kind of the point I was trying to drive home just a few seconds ago. Is process flows and looking at things digitally is one thing, but I think once you make process observations because of a system-driven task, you look at physical constraints and barriers, at a particular site. I think that really drives home the scope and the requirement of what you need a system to help do.
From my perspective, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I even said it today. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, we may have gotten lazy as salespeople because we can get on the phone, ask 35 questions, understand the problem they're trying to solve. And then the minute you step foot in the warehouse, you go, what's that? And why do you do that way? Okay, well, we never talked about that process, but man, oh man, that's some quick wins right here. Let's change that process, right? So I think pictures worth 1,000 words, and being able to walk the site is going to be helpful. Okay, so we did the strategic master plan. We determined the 2 DCs are there. We said the longest pole in the tent was the WMS. Great, we got that kicked off and rolling. Now we got to get ready for making sure our facility prep is ready to go for the new WMS. One of the things that we like to do is something called a storage type analysis. And the goal of that is to really identify the ideal size and quantity of the forward pick location to minimize replenishment, and the reserve storage to make sure we're getting the most dense storage. So we leveraged the tool Optricity's OptiSlot. We went in and we created every little size of case flow, bin shelf, high density storage, and then we hit optimize. And then it starts putting all of the categories based on the cube of the item and its class in the different storage mechanisms. And then we do iterations, and we standardize usually on no more than 12, always probably more 4 or 5 different size openings. And at the end of the result, we were able to really say, holy cow, Joe, you guys are replenishing way more than you should. So in the Greenville facility, they have 3,700 existing bins, 58 case flow, 82 single deep pallet. But based on the pallets on hand, right, they've only got 1,246 single deep in reserve, but they've got so many SKUs that have 20, 30, 40 pallets of the same item on hand. You typically don't want to store that in single deep selective rack. You want to put that in some high density storage. So we said, holy cow, we knew that there was an opportunity to get more product in the facility if we went with some, high density storage. On the flip side, we said you need 140 bays of case flow. You only have 58. You have 82 bays missing, which means this product is sitting in a bin shelf, which means you're replenishing it daily and weekly, when if it was in a case flow, you might replenish it once every 2 weeks or maybe once every 4 weeks. So we really uncovered some deltas in Greenville. Same thing for Mansfield, even to a bigger degree. They only have 60 bays of case flow and they need 341. And then, believe it or not, 3 deep pallet flow, meaning that they have some fast moving items, paper, some bigger items, where they actually should have 3 deep pallet flow position, meaning that they're moving 60, 120, 180 cube within 3 to 5 days. And they need that many pick bays of items. So you probably have 160 to 300 items that are moving that volume in Greenville, and probably 360 to 500 in Mansfield. So I think that was the big aha for me, Joe. Any uncoverings there for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Michael, the graphic speaks to it, right? You know, I think replenishment is always the hidden factory cost, if you will, right? Because there's always a large focus on the package getting out the door or the package coming in the door. But there's a lot of labor lost in the replenishment piece, yes.
Yeah. So that allowed us to go, okay, great. So we originally said it was about $5 million to change and make the retrofit. Now that we know they're in the right location, now that we got the WMS kicked off, let's do this store type analysis to see how much we should change in the building. Well, guess what? Steel prices went up, lead times went up, prices went up since our original strategic master plan in 2021. I didn't know, right, that we were going to need to replace so many of those case flow locations. And I didn't know the quality of the conveyors in Greenville were so bad. So that was all good. But then, hey, let's take the Nashua operation and move it into the Greenville and Mansfield facility. And now we're going to, we were done. And then Joe's like, hey, let's redo it. Let's move Nashua in and let's see how that changes the mix. And you know what? We knew that we weren't going to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. But it did allow us to understand what the opportunity cost was, how much offsite storage we were going to need, transportation to support that offsite storage. And then we even dug in a little bit deeper, all of the product coming in, international, rail, Chicago, the deconsolidation hub. If I was going to go get a new facility and I could do that versus outsource it, how much space would that require? How much juice would be worth the squeeze if I took that in? And oh, by the way, Ryan and Kevin are going to keep going. So what happens if we add another acquisition instead of 2% growth year over year? Maybe we need to look at 2 to 10 to 10, right? Thinking about it. So now we looked at that, but here's the other part. I got a job to do. I got to ship 7 to 11,000, orders a day. I can't just shut down my facility, or I can't move all my shipping to one facility while we make changes in the new building. So as we start to think about, operating on a daily basis, allowing Bryce and Mike to be able to run their businesses, but yet make the improvements, what's the risk mitigation strategy on these layouts and these retrofits? And then, oh, by the way, my fleet, holy cow, some of these trucks are very, very old. We want to be more sustainable. We want to look at, newer trucks, reusable energy, renewable energy, different types of things. And how many do we own? How many we're releasing? If I go from a very narrow aisle at 6 foot to a 9.5, 10-foot aisle, I need new trucks. Well, good news. Very narrow aisle trucks are really expensive, anywhere between 120 and 150, where a narrow aisle truck is anywhere between 30 and 40. So you can get 3 to 4 for the cost of one. So how do I, migrate my fleet over? I still want to be able to do unloading on the dock. I still got replenishments. I still got case picking. So thinking about the big picture, a lot of things had changed, from our initial understanding and the volumes. So coming into it, we really wanted to say, if we made these investments, what would we do on the pick location? So if we were to make another acquisition, how many more SKUs, how many more pick bases? So within Greenville, we knew that we could get about a 7% lift on the pick. And in Mansfield, we get about a 20% pick. On the pallet storage, right, making high density storage available, we could go from 9,900 pallets to 14,900. On the Mansfield, from 13,000 to 14,000. So not as much benefit on the reserve storage in Mansfield, but definitely a greater pick. And then on the flip side, not as much on the Greenfield pick, but a lot on the storage. So it was a great exercise. It really understood what we need, how we need it, why we need it, built the ROI. Anything you want to add here, Joe?
No, Michael, I think again, the graphic here kind of sums it up, right? I think the big learnings that we ran into were There was going to need to be quite a bit of investment, right, to bring Greenville's conveyors up to speed. Yeah, I think that was the biggest one.
Very cool. All right. Now talking about quick wins and talk about facility prep. So, all right, Michael, I need to get some ROI as quick as I can to pay for this WMS and to start getting the money for all this equipment and making the switches. So we actually did a storage type analysis. We did the facility design layout. We got it all good. We created a digital twin using Optricity's OptiSlot. And with that, we took 1 week's worth of orders and we dropped it down. And so what it says is we're doing about 56 lines per hour based on where all the items are, how we're doing it today, 298 units per hour, traveling 904,000 feet, total travel time, picking cost, replenishment. And then we went through and created all these alternatives. And then the one we ended up going with was number 7. So that gets us 65 lines per hour, 342 units per hour. And the cost to pick is $12,009 versus the $14,800. And our total cost is $13,900 versus $16,000. Now, while this might not be the optimal, right? Because we see the total distance was, alternative 3, travel time, alternative 3 and 5, and then hits by time and pick. But working with the team, understanding the idiosyncrasies of the business. In some areas, we're doing, golden zone. Some areas we're doing wedge. Some areas we're doing diamond pick. In the non-conveyable, building the pallet, heavy to light. This was the one that we chose, and this is the benefit. So I know that Greenville's starting to make the moves and getting the benefit. And I think Mansfield, we are about to run our, comp report and show the potential benefit week over week based on the slotting. Anything you want to add here, Joe?
No, I think, again, slotting is something that we've struggled with, from doing it from a consistent standpoint. I think, and there's real value associated with what we're going to be doing there. You mentioned, some of the attributes that kind of drive additional iterations to come about from the comm reports. Some of the other things as well. I think we'll be in a position to leverage the optimal solution, right, or the optimal iteration once we get into some of these other facility upgrades and layouts, right, as it relates to some of the case flows and things of that nature.
Absolutely. And then the WMS now is going to do directed put away, triggered replenishment, right? It's going to start to manage where these items are and how to execute it. And then we get it orchestrated, right, with the conductor and get it baked into your Blue Yonder WMS and have it, self-healing warehouse. So we'll get there. Okay. Facility design and layout. Like you said, Joe, now that we know what we need, where it's at, how do I do it without mitigating my business? And we talked about a crawl, walk, run strategy. So the crawl, Scott Moats is probably the one that's most excited. A print and apply. So now that if we have a WMS, we cartonize it, we pick into that outbound carton. Instead of having pack stations, we can actually have a carton go down, actually get the proper FedEx overnight, next day or 2-day label put on it and have it directly go into the outbound dock door. So this was the crawl. And we worked with, Scott and his team, as well as Joe, to figure out exactly how many and what days, because now we need to know how many print and apply units. Do we need 2 or 3? How many lines do we need? What's the accumulation from the picking area to this and that? Believe it or not, it's math and science all day long. So we worked with our partner, Conveyor Solutions Incorporated. What you see depicted here is the existing facility. So you've got a conveyor going down this fast pick area where they're all single D pallets, and you're picking to the conveyor, comes down this way, goes up a spiral, goes into the pick module, goes over here to the bins, and then comes all the way back out, and then hits all these pack stations, and then the outbound sorts FedEx, UPS, LTL, lanes, and outbound. So, okay, great. Now, Scott, how are we going to do it? Well, first, we're going to actually create an elevated conveyor decking above the existing pick module. Then we'll get the print applies up and running and have those come down into the outbound station. All right, sounds great. So that's the crawl. What about a walk? Okay, so now we know that we need to create this new pick module. So we're going to leave this pick module here for a short period of time. We're going to consume some of the reserve storage and the case picking, and we're going to go in and wreck a brand new 3-level pick to light module. And we're going to have a high density storage on the outside and the pushback rack on the outside of this. Then what we'll do is we'll build the conveyor, and then overnight we'll tie it in and be able to get it connected. So that way we do not have an issue, and we have the ability to turn it on and go live. And then once we're done with that, we can rip out the old pick module and then refill it with the required storage on the outside. So Bryce and Michael are like, great, that's super, we can do that. And then, quite honestly, we'll have a very successful project. And, this is just a detailed picture of how the print and apply and the outbound sortation comes in on top of the old system. And then, believe it or not, still in Joe and my heart, you want to talk about really mitigating risk, have 2 DCs build a brand new DC. And if we were to put all the needs of both facilities in the one, based on the storage type analysis and the growth, this is what a new facility would look like. You'd have, quote unquote, 4 pick modules, different levels of case flow and bins, pallet flow and bins, and an outbound sortation. So got to always think with the end in mind, knowing what the ideal state would be, kind of that's where we're at. So right now, today, we talked about the overall approach, right? We talked about who school specialty is, the problem we were trying to solve. The strategic master plan gave us a 5-year planning horizon. If we do nothing, what's the labor cost? We wanted to make sure before we make investments in fixing the facilities, where should the facilities be? Did the WMS selection and implementation. We got the go live in April. We performed the storage type analysis and automation evaluation. We uncovered a lot of deltas between ideal state for minimizing replenishment and travel versus what was there. Now we know what we can do. Let's get some quick wins. So we used Optricity slotting. We're making moves, we're getting value. And then with the facility design and layout, we're looking at a crawl, walk, run strategy for the future. So Joe, with that being said, any other, aha moments, or we can turn it over to questions?
Yeah, no, Michael, I think the only aha moment I'll call out is we went to see, we did some benchmarking tours, right? Went to see, what the art of the possible looked like. And I remember looking at you and saying, I want that, right? As it relates to Panda, because there was, there's a direct reduction or an impact, right, on the labor consumed in those particular areas. And, in this day and age, at least the last 2 years anyway, right? It helps with some of the labor pressures, right? Not only from a hiring standpoint, but also the wage rates as they continue to increase as well. So yeah, get me that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Brenda, I see quite a few chat and Q&A. What kind of questions do you have for us?
Yeah, we've got a couple questions here. The first one was, what factors did you use to do the outsource versus in-house plan, i.e. resources, equipment, insurance, IT communication and connections, etc.?
Yeah, so I think you might have seen we had a slide where we had all of the internal costs and the cost to make the investment. And then what we did is we created an RFP and we submitted that to Radial and CJ Logistics. They came back, and based on their numbers, we went through with a fine-tooth comb with both of them to make sure we understood the investment, what the benefit would be, and the cost. And at the end of the day, the best option for school specialty was actually to fix both DCs with the new WMS versus outsource. So we looked at the cost of onboarding and the overall 3 and 4 year, I think we looked at, Joe, evaluation. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, and I was 3 and 4. And again, I think there was also going to have to be a shared investment, right, in some of the infrastructure to make that happen as well. And that was kind of what drove us back to really upgrading our own infrastructure.
All right, Brenda.
Awesome, thank you. Next one, did your growth projection change over the past few years with all the changes?
Yes, yeah. So I'll take that. Yeah, they certainly have changed. But I would say they'll fall within the realms of 5 to 7%, right, at this point. Now, I do want to, I think there's a difference in the types of demands. A lot of the changes that we're going to see in our growth is more so in a value-added services demand, if you will, kind of building kits and/or bundles. So it's not necessarily, if you will look at it straight from one particular unit, you got to dig down into understanding all of the task demand associated with that. So there certainly has been a change in the growth projections.
And the reason I was chuckling, Brenda, is Joe's not the only customer that when we get done with something, they call back and go, can we change that growth and the SKU growth? We're probably going to make another acquisition, or business is better than it was. And the great thing is that we already have it all in the data set. So we're able to change it very quickly and show kind of a, conservative, a moderate, aggressive, and then, let the team decide how they want to present it to the board. So, yeah, we've got a client right now. We just finished up. We're ready to go. We're ready to start pouring concrete. And lo and behold, they just won a significant national customer that's probably going to, increase their volume by 30 or 35%. So it's really quick. We go in, we add the volume, a couple of additional SKUs, and we can reiterate on the storage type analysis. And instead of a X square footage building, it's X plus square footage building, and being able to just update it so quickly.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we've got a couple more. Next one, you've referenced labor numerous times. How difficult is finding the labor, and how did you build it into the model?
I'm going to let you answer that, Joe.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? It didn't come through.
How hard is it to find labor in Greenville and Mansfield?
Yeah, so it's a great question because the markets are challenged in finding labor and supporting the demand here locally. I think we have a blended approach, right, of our internal recruiting services, temporary labor, because it's highly variable at this point, right? Especially the need to respond to peak shipping seasons, one that is drastic as ours, it certainly lends itself to be a challenge. And I would say, coupled with some of the wage pressures, that means we're constantly looking at labor rates and how we're going to market from our recruiting strategy to try to draw that talent in.
And I think the other thing too is that you guys built a nice community. Like, you go to Greenville, Wisconsin, and a lot of your employees have been with you a long time. You go to Mansfield, a lot of your employees have been with you a long time. So this has never been about cutting heads or getting rid of heads. It's how can we sustain the growth and make it easier for our employees. All right, what else you got, Brenda?
All right, we'll do one last one. And there was one question, are we going to share the presentation? And yes, for everyone that's registered for the webinars, we will be sending the presentation afterwards. All right, last one. If school specialty could have done anything differently, what would it have been? And would they have done anything sooner or changed anything in the process?
I don't know that I would change anything in the process, because I think the strategic master plan approach was the right way to go, right, to answer as many questions as we had. However, I would probably should have made investments in our conveyor sooner, right, Michael, in Greenville. I think that's the only thing I really would change.
And Joe, you bring up a really good point. Is I think the big aha in the last 24 weeks is we've had so many customers that have recently gone live, or we did a project for, MJ Holdings spoke at Modex last year, and we had top design of the year, and they were really, really happy. And they went from a release every 8 weeks to a release every 4 weeks. And instead of X amount of SKUs, it's those kinds of SKUs. So they got to a point where they were doing, 500 plus replenishments a week. And they're calling me on the phone going, Michael, our order profiles changed. We got way too many replenishments. And so my aha was, man, even though we go live, we should do like either quarterly audits or twice a year audits. Has the order profile changed? Is the, direct to consumer orders versus the retail orders changed? Do we have the right number of, size of the forward pick location? So I think we need to do a better job of partnering with our customers to ensure they're getting the most value from their investment. And it's not a big study. It's just, let's get some data and let's just do an analysis and see what the deltas are, and if there's something we can do to change and help our customers get more value from their investment. So it's the post go live assessment. So now, you know, we got the WMS going live in April. We'll make some changes in May. We'll keep the slotting going open. By June or July, as you guys are winding down your peak season, September, October, we can refresh the data. How do we do during our peak? Did we hit our metrics? What could we have done better? So I want to make sure for next peak, you know, we take all the lessons learned from this peak and continually iterate on it and improve the process.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Those are all the questions that we did have people submit. However, it is not your last chance to ask any questions. You can either come and join us at the next webinar in April. We'll be talking Green Days, 5 ways to get green in existing distribution center. And then you can always reach out to Alpine Supply Chain. I think we've got Michael and both Joe's contact information up on the screen. We'd love to be able to answer any questions that you may think after the webinar.
So Joe, thank you so much for the partnership. And I look forward to seeing you Sunday night in Chicago for our good old friends over there at ProMat. So hopefully we'll see everybody that was on the webinar today. Feel free to stop by our booth. We're going to be having a little happy hour on Monday and Tuesday from 3 to 5. So stop by our booth to get your koozie and have an adult beverage with us.
Will do. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.